Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into a really interesting book, La vita delle forme, Filosofia del reincanto. It's this collaboration between Alessandro Michele, the fashion designer, and the philosopher Emanuele Coccia.
Yeah, and it's not just about fashion, is it? It's deeper. They're looking at how form, like the shape of things and life itself are, well, fundamentally linked. Fashion is kind of their main lens for exploring that.
Exactly. And what's fascinating right away is how they wrote it. It's not like Michelle writes a chapter, then Coccia writes one.
Yeah, their voices are woven together. It feels very deliberate, almost like, um, those old manuscripts where you'd have the main text and then commentaries sort of running alongside it on the same
Oh,
page.
yeah. That's a great comparison. It really visually represents their idea, doesn't it? That the form isn't separate from the meaning, it's all intertwined.
Precisely. It underscores the whole point from the get-go.
Right. So, for our deep dive today, the mission really is to pull out the key ideas from this conversation they're having in the book. We'll look at that life form connection, this pretty bold idea about fashion being a top art form, how clothes relate to time, which is interesting, and this slightly mind-bending concept that objects, even our clothes, might have their own kind of aliveness.
Yeah, animism. The goal, I suppose, is to give everyone listening a bit of a fresh look at the world, maybe even their own closet.
Okay, let's start with that core idea then. Life and form being tangled up together.
Well, Kochi puts forward this fundamental point.
Hmm.
All life speaks, essentially,
Yeah.
by becoming visible, by taking some kind of form.
So it's not just about like shouting or writing.
Not at all. Even subtle things, a scent, a vibration, a color, they're all forms of communication. For anything alive, taking form is speaking. It's how it interacts with the world.
So in that view, there's no real silence. Everything is constantly appearing.
Pretty much. Appearing, sensing, experiencing. Life is this constant exchange, taking on form, giving form.
And Michelle picks up on this, right? He sees fashion as, what did he call it? The most radical expression of this intimacy.
Yeah, the most radical and modern expression of this really ancient connection between form and life. It's a big claim.
It is. And interestingly, Cochia says it wasn't necessarily the big Gucci shows that fully convinced him. It was something smaller.
Right. It was a story Michel told at his country house during one of their first chats. He was renovating it, stripping back the walls.
Okay.
And as they peeled back the layers, these unexpected forms started appearing. Things painted underneath, hidden for who knows how long. Eagles, angels, sort of grotesque figures, even this weird inscription that looked like the house laid out as an astrological chart.
Wow. Hidden history literally emerging from the walls.
Exactly. And Michel described how the whole feel of the place changed. Suddenly, he said, everything started to speak, to live. The forms gave it life.
That's incredible. So the book is saying that even stuff we think of as inert, like stone walls or presumably fabric, it holds history, it can communicate.
That's the core idea they extend to clothes. That matter can be a house of the spirit, as they put it.
And through making things art, buildings, fashion, we engage with that spirit. We find freedom.
Kind of, yeah. By working with matter, we create tools for thinking, for understanding, for expressing ourselves more freely.
Which leads them to that claim you mentioned, fashion as the most radical art form today. Why radical?
Well, the argument is that fashion uniquely achieves what a lot of the early 20th century avant-garde artists were striving for, merging art completely with everyday life.
Ah, okay. Breaking down the barrier between the gallery and the street.
Precisely. Unlike, say, needing to go to a museum or a concert hall to experience other art forms.
Fashion is just there with us.
Exactly. It's part of our daily routine, whether we think about it consciously or not. It accompanies us, intensifies moments. You don't need a special occasion.
That makes sense. And it's everywhere, isn't it? Clothing is probably the most universal artifact humans have.
The book makes that point very clearly. Everyone wears clothes. Doesn't matter about your social class, age, location, beliefs, identity. It cuts across everything.
It's a daily interaction. It marks time. Even just changing for bed, like you mentioned, it's constant.
A fundamental part of being human, really.
So how does this constant presence, this universality, connect to how we think about time? The book has some interesting ideas there.
It really does. They propose thinking about clothing not just as being in fashion for a specific moment, but as a tool for being truly contemporary.
And contemporary doesn't just mean right now.
Not in their view. It means using clothing to open up time itself, to allow different eras, different forms, different ideas to coexist in the present moment, creating shared experiences across time.
So wearing something vintage isn't just about looking retro. It's about bringing that past time into the now, making it live again alongside the present.
Yeah, or mixing elements so that the lines blur. Michelle's approach, they argue, is about intensifying the present moment so much that past, present, and future kind of melt together.
Making time more fluid, less linear.
Exactly. It's
Ah,
almost like, well, they draw a parallel to alchemy.
alchemy. Like turning lead into gold.
Sort of, but more the philosophical side. Alchemists were searching for the philosopher's stone, this mythical substance or technique to intensify life, to overcome death even.
Okay, I see the connection. Intensifying life.
And crucially, alchemists believed you had to engage with matter, even difficult stuff like metals, to save the soul, to achieve transformation. You couldn't just think your way there.
You had to get your hands dirty, literally.
Right. And the book emphasizes this alchemical idea.
Yeah.
You can't save yourself without saving the world, and vice versa. Our bodies are made of the same stuff as the earth, ultimately. It's all connected.
That's a powerful link. Let's shift gears slightly. How does Michelle approach this personally? The book talks about fashion starting from intimacy, right?
Absolutely. He emphasizes that his designs always stem from personal experiences, from intimate feelings. It's not some abstract intellectual exercise for him.
So how does that work in practice?
He describes it as being traversed by the world, letting its life, its energy flow through him, and then filtering that into the forms he creates. It's like this ongoing process of discovery.
And he finds inspiration just by watching people.
Yeah, very much so. He talks about observing people in ordinary city settings, stopped at a traffic light, on the subway, sitting in a cafe, just watching them.
Trying to imagine what they'd wear, what they feel.
Exactly. Celebrating that diversity, the energy of urban life. The book really highlights the street as this crucial social space for fashion,
Why the streets specifically?
because it's where society kind of shows itself unfiltered, all different kinds of people mixing. It's less bound by strict rules than, say, an office or a formal event. It allows for pure interaction, for change, for new looks to circulate.
That makes sense. It's a space of possibility. And this connects to using things from the past, right? Recontextualizing them.
Yes. Michelle talks about using garments that feel familiar, things that have already been, like maybe a shirt style his grandmother wore, or something a music teacher might have had.
Okay, familiar archetypes.
Right. And then he puts them onto different bodies, maybe traditionally masculine bodies, changing the context completely.
And that gives them a new voice.
That's the idea. It reignites the past, makes it speak differently. Fashion becomes a rediscovery, a kind of poetic spell.
So putting an outfit together is like rearranging words in a sentence, taking existing elements and making new meaning.
That's a good way to put it. The words are the clothes, the familiar items, and you detonate them, re-signify them by how you combine them. Makes the language of clothes really expansive.
This idea of playing with time and context,
Yeah,
it sounds quite philosophical.
it is. And the book brings in the philosopher Giorgio Agamben's ideas about being contemporary.
Okay, what's his take?
Agamben defines being truly contemporary as being slightly out of sync with your own time, a bit asynchronous.
That sounds counterintuitive. How does being out of sync help you understand your time?
Because that slight distance, that disconnect, allows you to perceive its darkness, its underlying currents, not just its surface lights. You're not completely swept away by it.
Interesting. And Agamben connects this specifically to fashion.
He does, yeah. He notes fashion's unique relationship with time, its way of constantly referencing the past while defining the present. The book uses the example of walking through the Roman Forum.
Ah, where you see layers of history literally built on top of each other.
Exactly, different eras physically coexisting.
Yeah.
It's a visual metaphor for this layering of time that fashion can achieve.
And there's that story about Agamben visiting Michelle's office.
Yeah, apparently Michelle's office was just filled with vintage clothes, all these pieces from different times. Agamben looked around and said something like, "This room is the only bridge you have to go elsewhere."
Wow. Seeing fashion literally as a bridge between times, between different ways of being human.
Powerful image, isn't it? And this power extends to challenging other fixed ideas, like gender.
How so? The book talks about an anthropological revolution.
Yeah, the idea is that fashion can push gender away from being a rigid, fixed identity and towards being more of a space of ambiguity, of possibility.
So instead of being strictly male or female, fashion allows for more fluidity.
That's the suggestion.
Yeah.
That belonging to a gender could mean embodying multiple identities at once. They even reference Plato's myth of the hermaphrodite from the Symposium, but kind of reverse it.
How do they reverse it?
Instead of seeing that unified being as something lost in the past, they suggest Clothing allows us to achieve a kind of hermaphroditism now, through our alliance with the material world with clothes. It's about embracing multiplicity.
That's a radical thought. It connects back to taking things out of context, doesn't it? Like that détournement idea.
Exactly.
Sure.
That avant-garde technique, used a lot by the situationists, taking something, an image, an object, a phrase, removing it from its usual context, and giving it a new, often subversive meaning.
Like putting a slogan on a t-shirt it was never meant for.
Right. And the book notes that Gucci's Spring-Summer 2016 collection title was actually a direct nod to détournement.
So by constantly doing this, taking past styles, remixing them fashion, messes with the idea of a single, fixed history.
Precisely. It shows that the past is never really finished. There are always unexhausted possibilities within it. Fashion acts like a virus, they say, making time ambiguous, preventing it from just settling into predictable tradition.
Okay, this is fascinating. Now let's get into what might be the most unusual part for some listeners. This idea of objects, including clothes, having a kind of life or spirit.
Animism?
Yeah, this definitely pushes against the common Western view where humans are here and inanimate objects are just over there, separate, lifeless.
So what are they proposing instead?
That objects, especially things we use and care for like clothes, aren't really separate from us. They're like reverberations of our life outside the body, extensions of our being.
How do they become extension?
Through use, through care, we imbue them with our energy, our memories, our feelings. They end up embodying our words, our actions.
That reminds me a bit of, wasn't it Georg Simmel who talked about the radioactivity of the human being? Exactly. Simmel's idea that each person has this sort of sphere of meaning and aura, blending the psychological and the physical. And clothing intensifies and expresses that sphere.
So it's not just a covering, it's projecting something of ourselves outward.
Right. And the book brings in the anthropologist Alfred Gell to argue that this animistic way of thinking isn't actually that strange or exotic.
How so?
Jill pointed out how common it is, even in the West. Think about how kids treat their favorite toys. They give them personalities, feelings, or how adults might talk to their car or get attached to an old appliance.
Yeah, okay, I see that. We do form relationships with things.
In art, the book argues art is a huge form of animism in our culture. We readily attribute psychic qualities, emotions, intentions to paintings, sculptures, inanimate objects.
We talk about a painting being sad or powerful.
Exactly. That's animism, maybe just not calling itself that.
So if clothes have this soul, this animistic quality, what does that mean for us? How does that change things?
Well, the book suggests our relationship with them can be liberating. If they're not just dead matter, then interacting with them is a different kind of dialogue.
Liberating how?
They touch on examples from social science where objects seem to influence behavior, almost make decisions. Think of Langdon Winter's analysis of Robert Moses's Low Bridges.
Designed to keep buses, and thus poorer people, away from certain parks.
Right. The object dictates behavior.
Or Bruno Latour's example, speed bumps forcing you to slow down, seatbelt alarms nagging you, objects shaping actions.
Okay. But how is fashion liberating in this context? Isn't it often seen as restrictive, a form of social control?
It can be, but the book argues Michelle's fashion pushes against that. It doesn't see clothes as just signs of societal pressure or violence. Instead, it tries to imagine new kinds of happiness, personal and shared.
By embracing lots of different styles? Multiplicity.
Yes, by embracing multiplicity, his collections try to teach us to feel at home in all sorts of expressions, to not be confined. This connects to that other metaphor they use. Gender as a map and clothing as an atlas. Can you unpack that?
Sure. The idea is that gender isn't just about your body. It's more like a map you use to orient yourself in the world and for others to orient themselves in relation to you.
So having a gender helps others understand themselves by seeing you.
Kind of. It creates perspective.
Yeah.
The book talks about a homoerotic dynamic here, not necessarily sexual, but about recognizing and understanding yourself through the other. Seeing your own experience made comprehensible through someone else's body, their perspective. They call this tenderness.
Tenderness as this opening of the self through the other. Okay, and clothes are the atlases.
Yeah, because they're seen as animated, as having these voices. We can recognize ourselves in them. They can guide us, educate us in this tenderness, this connection.
And this animistic view is deeply personal for Michele.
Oh, absolutely. He flat out describes himself as an animist and a tireless worshiper of all things.
He really believes everything has a life, a voice.
If we pay attention, yes. He says observation turns into entering this huge library where objects are constantly whispering, murmuring, singing.
And these voices, Where do they come from?
They're the accumulation of lives that have touched the object, the maker, the
Yeah.
people who loved it, used it, cared for it. All those traces remain.
He feels like a dowser listening for these whispered.
Yeah, like he's tuning into these hidden frequencies, and through them, living countless other lives contained within the objects.
That's quite a way to experience the world. He mentions Michelangelo's Pietà.
Yes, a really specific, powerful moment. He was looking at the back of the sculpture, where you can still see the marks from Michelangelo's chisel. Rougher, less polished.
Okay.
And he felt this intense wave of chills. He sensed the stone itself as alive, humming with the artist's emotions, the urgency of the form struggling to emerge. It wasn't just marble, it was feeling made solid.
Wow. Feeling the presence of the creator in the material.
Exactly. And the book says finding this voice often means finding the retro, that trace of the maker's imagination, their feelings, left behind in the object.
You like looking at the back of a carpet.
That's their example. Seeing the knots, the structure it's witnessing, the enduring gesture of its creation, still present.
This perspective must change how you see collections of things, too.
Definitely. Objects in a collection aren't just items on a list. They're participating in this collective dance, no hierarchy. Collecting, then, isn't about classification or control.
It's about multiplying love, connection.
That's the idea. The joy isn't picking a favorite, but moving between them, feeling those different lives. Michele talks about his own vintage shoe collection.
What about it?
He feels like putting them on, or even just holding them, lets him immediately step into the lives of the people who wore them before. It's an instant immersion.
And the objects themselves interact.
The book suggests they communicate. They conspire almost. Caring for a collection isn't just dusting, it's nurturing these silent friendships between the objects.
He mentions arranging teddy bears as a child.
Yeah, this sort of primal need to be surrounded by this blanket of objects, to feel their presence. Organizing a collection, arranging things, is a way to animate the world, to start a dialogue with reality, letting life flow between you and the things around you.
It makes the material world feel so much more alive, connected.
Absolutely. Which makes their final point about a particular artwork really striking, the fresco of the resurrection in Orvieto.
What's striking about
The
it?
complete absence of things. It shows the resurrected bodies, but there are no plants, no animals, no artifacts, just humans in this barren, empty space.
Why is it depicted like that?
Theologically, the idea is that resurrected bodies are perfect, self-sufficient. They don't need anything else.
But how does that feel, according to the book?
It evokes this profound anguish. A world with only humans, no things. Feels like a kind of prison, confinement within our own skin.
So we need things. Our connection to the material world is essential for a full life.
That's the powerful conclusion. Life without things, without these extensions of ourselves, would be deeply impoverished.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've really covered a lot of ground. This fundamental link between life and form, seen through fashion.
Yeah, and fashion presented not just as clothes, but as this radical art form, deeply connected to our experience of time, blurring past, present, and future.
And then this whole animistic view, objects, clothes, having their own stories, their own life, extending our own being into the world.
It really shifts the perspective, doesn't it? Clothing becomes more than just fabric. It's a carrier of stories, a tool for connection, a way of understanding ourselves and the world.
Definitely. Which leads to a final thought for everyone listening. Maybe consider the voices of the objects in your own life, especially your clothes.
What stories are embedded in that favorite sweater, those old shoes? How do they shape how you feel about time or who you are?
Perhaps paying a bit more attention to the forms around us, like Michele suggests, could unlock, well, maybe a bit more enchantment in the everyday.
A kind of re-enchantment, like the book's subtitle suggests.
Exactly. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
My pleasure. It was fascinating to explore.